Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful new episode of the StudioMEcast. Today, we have another special guest. This is Lee Q. Murray. He is an actor, a screenwriter, and the author of at least a few books, and we're going to be talking about a lot of cool things today. We're going to just jump right in. Lee, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So, one of the reasons why I called you on here was because you're an actor who has done some auditions here in the studio, and at some point we were talking about film history, and you brought up that you had a VHS documentary of Otto Preminger, and I love VHS still. I'm very much a format snob at this point. Like, I love 4K, and I love watching like prints of things. I don't have that kind of projector at home really or anything, but the one thing that I am very nostalgic for is VHS tapes, you know.
See, if it's not Betamax, I won't even watch it.
Well, I loved the documentary. It was really a cool thing. It was put out by, I think, the Otto Preminger estate as well. But yeah, I just thought, hey, I should have you on and we should have a cool conversation because we've talked a bit in the studio about different things, and we may as well, you know,
I'm just doing this because you're Irish.
Oh, well, you know,
if you weren't Irish,
extremely. So, yes, if it is. Can you tell? Yeah, in fact, how about, let's just start off with acting. How long have you been doing that? When did you get into it?
Boy, well, I can't think of anything else I ever wanted to do. Of course, in high school and junior high. We called it junior high back then. I guess nowadays they call it middle school. I dabbled in it and stuff like that. But I took it seriously after graduating high school, started taking classes. As a matter of fact, my first acting coach just passed away. She was John Cassavetes in his first movie, Shadows. She was the star of that, her and Ben Carruthers. And that was my first acting class. And she taught me a real appreciation she studied under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio in New York, and she taught me just a real appreciation for art in all of its forms. That's what I got out of her classes. Just I appreciated acting more, but also all the other art forms, and she taught me how to really indulge in each one of them, really immerse yourself in them, and it will just broaden you as a creative person. She was right.
What are some other art forms that you appreciate?
Literature. Paying attention to literature, filmmaking, paying attention to exactly not just watching what the actors are doing, but really paying attention to what's going on up there. Painting. She would tell us to go to museums and just take it in. She called it filling the artistic well, as her flowery way of putting it. Just filling your well with imagery, because that's what it is. It's imagery. Art is that's what feeds you as a creative person is imagery. The things you see, the things you smell, your senses taking things in. And she taught us that could be very valuable. And you could smell something that reminds you of your grandmother, her house, like her food. Say your grandmother who died tragically, you could smell that food now and burst into tears. Well, if you're an actor, that's very useful. I need to cry for this scene. Imagine smelling grandma's cooking or something. Boom. So it's just kind of learning what moves you, learning how to stir up the silt, so to speak. I just think that's important in every. It's like musicians too. You can go to a concert, you can tell who's moved and who's just sort of doing it by rote, who's just going through the motions, and it's like, oh, well, gee, thanks for that. And others who are just so dialed in, they dial you in because they're so connected to it. Something's clicking. So. But anyway, getting back to it, that's what she taught me. That was my first class.
I totally identify with that mentality. There was not to talk smack on anybody in particular, but sometimes when you're in college you're dumb, right? And when I was in art school, I knew a bunch of people who were filmmakers or animators, and a lot of them. I don't even know specifically that this was an animation or film thing, but there were a bunch of people in the art department who wanted to be so exclusively focused on what they were primarily there for, whether it was painting or drawing or animation or filmmaking, that they didn't. I saw a lot of people who were very vocal about disregarding any other classes they were taking. You know, they kind of wanted to be an idiot savant for painting or just be good at drawing. But for instance, they didn't want to apply themselves to the mathematics that they had to take as well, or the literature, or even just the foundational courses like 2D and 3D design, you know, or the drawing class. It's like, well, I'm trying to make films. Why am I going to do drawing? And I drank those things up.
Yeah.
And I definitely have seen that I am better for it. Not that those other people haven't gone on to be successful in their own way, but I kind of feel like if you're a filmmaker and all you're looking at is films, then a lot of your work's just going to be, I guess, derivative of other films. It's like you should find inspiration from a wide range of sources. So yeah, I love going to museums, love, reading, whatever it is, just to get something outside of the screen in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it'll definitely feed your performance, you know. I mean, perfect example, Johnny Depp. I mean, he went outside. I mean, he's a great observer of people and stuff like that. And when they did Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, he was reading about the pirates, and he read that pirates were the rock stars of their generation. And he went, rock stars? I know rock stars. My friend Keith Richards. And what you're seeing, of course, as we all know, is basically Keith Richards in his performance of Pirates of the Caribbean. So you can draw from sources that you wouldn't even think about. Just reading that, the rock stars of their generation, that clicks something in him. So you could see a painting that clicks with you. I mean, that'll feed something you're doing or trying to achieve. I can't remember who it was. One filmmaker, who was it? I can't remember. Saw a Jackson Pollock painting. You've seen those things. They look like a bad hangover. Yeah, they're just a big explosion of color, but there's something weird about them that kind of clicks sometimes. I'm not a fan, but some people do, and I can understand it. And it just fed his work. He had this staccato bursts of creativity while making this film, and it worked. He got what he wanted out of it. So yeah, you have to definitely, I mean, there's that famous, well, it's famous to me because I'm a nerd, but you mentioned animators, Willis O'Brien, who did King Kong, the original King Kong, the stop motion animation. And his apprentice was Ray Harryhausen, who did every great thing that I grew up with, all those Sinbad movies, and Jason and the Argonauts,
Clash of the Titans, with Maggie Smith.
And Ursula Andress and Burgess Meredith, who was narrated that.
Oh yeah.
He's, Harryhausen brought O'Brien his short film with his dinosaurs, and he says, "You need to study anatomy. You know, look at your dinosaur's legs. They look like wrinkled prunes. You don't know about musculature. You don't know about anatomy. You don't know about, what do these dinosaurs look like? What's their musculature? You got to make these things look real. You can't just get like a lizard suit and stuff it, and it's got to be specific."
Yeah,
and it worked. So he had to study things outside of just stop motion animation, how to make things move. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the things I had a book by Ray Harryhausen that I ended up giving to a stop motion animator friend of mine after I read it. And there was I'm pretty sure it was this book where Harryhausen said something along the lines of, whatever that creature's main function is should be one of the most significant images on their anatomy. Meaning, like, if the whole point of this thing is it eats people, it needs to have a big mouth, or or lots of teeth, you just by looking at the creature, you need to be able to know how this changes what's going on. And it can be as simple as, hey, it's a griffin, it has big wings, like that. But there's a reason why it's that. There's an infinite number of creatures out there, and there's a reason why you're picking that one, and it should have some kind of visual indicator as to why it is the way it is. So
right,
which I thought was just kind of a cool thing. So
little rules like that, but studying and disciplining yourself is when you learn these rules, and taking in, like we were talking about earlier, just the different art forms that can feed what you're doing. What gave him that notion? You know what I mean? That way. Just little rules like that can really, really carry things through. So
and having creatures make sense where, like the legs, it's like one time I'm working on a sci-fi right now, and there was a guy who used to be on the project who made a concept for this alien that's in it, and it was kind of frustrating because I had the concept art, and I was point is he came back with this design where the legs literally like would not be able to hold up the rest of the thing like that. I was just like, dude, this needs to be able to walk. Like, I know it's fake and it's a sci-fi, but I need people to kind of, buy into the vision here, and
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got mythology, sci-fi. Do you have a favorite film genre that you like watching?
I just love good films. I mean, I love a good Western. It's hard to find a new angle on that genre because it's been done to death. But when you do, it's always really inspired. Mm-hmm. That's why a good Western, nothing beats a good Western, because
like Django or something.
Yeah, well, because it's been beaten to death so much. So it's like, oh, here comes a new Western, and it's on a big release. They must have found something here. Mm-hmm. So that's why people flock to see Westerns, because they know it's not just going to be a rehash of High Noon, or a Bonanza episode. I like film noir a lot. That shadowy thing, that cynical thing that happened in the 40s and stuff like that, post World War II, and even the pre-noir stuff like M. I mean, absolutely terrifying motion picture that couldn't. I don't know how they got that made in 1931, but I mean, they would have had problems making that in 1961. Mm-hmm. I like a good horror movie, but not. I draw the line between. There's a difference between a horror movie and a splatter flick. I don't like splatter flicks. That's, to me, it's just it's like, it's like bathroom humor in comedies. It's like, really, I mean, you had nowhere else to go, so you just took the low hanging fruit.
Right.
That's what splatter flicks are. I mean, most splatter flicks. That's what blood, gore, torn limbs, naked teenagers. It's like, really? Okay.
Yeah. Now I will.
Atmospheric.
I totally get what you mean. I don't even disagree. The one, there's two splatter films that I've seen that I would go to bat for. And they were both made by Peter Jackson. Okay. The first one is actually his first film, his first feature. And it really is his first feature, because a lot of the time when people say, oh, this is Quentin Tarantino's first feature film, Reservoir Dogs, it's like, no, it's not. Most
the first one you
filmmakers
heard of.
Yeah, it's like most directors today who have, like, they talk about their first feature film, they have a trunk of features that you are never going to see. Like that because they are bad, or not bad, they're new, but it's, you stack them up against anything else.
It's their scribblings.
Yeah, exactly. And but Peter Jackson's first feature film is Bad Taste, and it's an insane movie, and it's clearly like a first film. It has so much passion behind it and so much work that went into that. If you watch it out of context, the first time I watched it, I didn't like it very much. I was like, how did this guy make Lord of the Rings? I don't get it. And then I watched the documentary he did on the making of it, which is called Good Taste Made Bad Taste. And it blew my mind how he made this movie with like these prosthetic special effects that he was making by hand and cooking in his mom's oven, and is just like, and so many and that movie grows like as it goes. Like, it definitely saves the best stuff for last, but it's just an insane splatter film. But then the one he followed it up with is called Brain Dead, or Dead Alive. Mm-hmm. It's known as the goriest movie ever made. And I totally believe it. And it is a unbelievable masterpiece of practical effects. It's insane what they do in this movie. And it's nauseating. The first time I watched it, I could only watch in small increments. I was like, I don't even know what to do with this movie. Like, this is rough, but now I love it. It's like after getting overwhelmed with it. Yeah. But yeah, I think just because the level of craft he put into that is like unbelievable. But yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah,
for
well,
sure.
I don't, as long as it's inspired, doesn't matter. Yeah. And I can deal with it. I mean, I mean, the first Nightmare on Elm Street on it had a lot of gore. You know what I mean? Fantastic movie.
Yeah.
It was a great movie. When it came out, it just rocked everybody. It's like, whoa, what's this? A dream killer. So yeah, as long as you're putting a new slant on it, I don't mind.
Yeah.
But I can just tell when you're just showing, because like filler on an album, you know what I mean? Like, okay, you need an extra song here, so you tossed in this, you know, you wrote this probably 20 minutes in your kitchen and put it on the album. I can tell when that's happening in a movie. It's like, oh, okay, let's throw in a severed limb. Let's throw in a set of boobs. Let's throw in, you know, it's just token stuff I don't like. And you can always spot it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I prefer atmospheric. I mean, look at Paranormal Activity. Nothing happens in that movie. Nothing happens, and yet it's unbearable. You're just like white knuckling it the whole way because they just created an absolutely terrifying atmosphere. It's what Hitchcock said. It's not the boo; it's the anticipation of the boo. And I always thought that was brilliant because that's what it is.
Yeah,
it just wound you up so tight. And Jaws. I mean, the best thing that happened to Spielberg was that the shark kept breaking down because then they couldn't show it. And so by the time you did see it, you were so spun. It was just always there, and you knew it was there somewhere.
And that one's crazy because everybody knows what a shark looks like, too. It's not like... I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about as much with Jaws is there's a lot of monster movies now that they won't show the monster, you know. They won't show... They'll do the Jaws thing, but... The difference between those movies and Jaws is that in those movies, you don't know what the monster looks like until it's revealed. Jaws, you know what a shark looks like the whole time, but it still works so well. So I think it's just such a great example. It's like it's just the pure example of that principle in film, where it's like, even if you know what that looks like, even it's not showing it can still have a powerful effect. It's just cold-blooded.
It adds some of John Williams' music, and it makes it even worse. Music is important. We remember, everybody knows the theme from Jaws. Everybody knows the theme from Halloween. Everyone knows that Psycho, you know, that metallic, raspy sound. It meant Norman was going to start slashing. We know, that's brilliant filmmaking to me. You know, it's not only having the visuals, but having the oral imagination stimulated, you know. It's like, oh God, please no.
Yeah, it's so good. I sometimes wonder, like, how many filmmakers will plan music before they even shoot in a weird way. Like, because sometimes the way that filmmakers work is they'll make the film and then they'll kind of pass it off to the composer. And they might collaborate with them after that, some to varying degrees. But then you also have some filmmakers who do this thing that I used to be guilty of, and then I found out why it's bad, is editing with temp music. So like you put Star Wars in the track while you're editing to kind of like, oh, this is kind of the feel I'm going for. I want this kind of exciting music, you know. And what you end up doing, though, is cutting based on music that's already written, and then you get rid of that track, and then you give it to the composer and say, hey, write something, but make it sound like this, which is just you're kneecapping your composer from the beginning. Fortunately, I never got to a point where I like did that with a composer, you know. But there were times where I was editing with like some track in there, like when I was in film school. And but the thing that I've wondered more and more is there's some scenes in movies that just do not work without music. Yeah. All right. So while they're editing it, the thing I wonder is sometimes, do they know this isn't working and they're just praying that the composer's gonna save them? Like, you know, like I just sometimes wonder, or not so much, oh, it's gonna save us, so much as they're planning for this to be a moment when the music comes forward a bit.
Yeah.
You know?
It's such a process, movie making, you know? And the way it's done has evolved and changed so much, you know? I saw an interview with Paul Newman where he's complaining like everything's done by committee now and market research and people voting, does this work and does this not work? He's like, what the heck are we doing here?
Yeah.
So
just make the movie.
Yeah, just make the movie. I think every once in a while someone comes along and just reminds us of what this this art form really is. And everyone, oh yeah, but then they start repeating and copying, and it's like, well, wait, no, you missed the point. The whole idea is be stimulated, go for your vision. Don't do market research. That's not, that's not gonna inspire anybody.
Yeah, I think that's something that that kind of reminds me of how Otto Preminger was constantly fighting censorship and things like the blacklist, and not just literal censorship for a particular word or imagery, but also just like breaking color lines in film, And one of the things that I always this documentary has been making me think about is, when it comes to getting feedback from the audience, whether it's market research or the industry reacting to how people are reacting to the more popular films or whatever. And sometimes that's a political thing where it's like people on this side want more of this or dislike that, and people on the other side want something else. In a weird way, I kind of feel like that's, I guess, almost like a more evolved form of censorship sometimes, with just when you're trying to placate the mob with your work, and sure, you want people to like it a lot of the time, but I think that's where you really do need someone like Otto to remind people, like, hey, people don't really fundamentally change that much. Like, they, you still should do something truthful, at least every once in a while. Yeah, and they might not like you for it, but I think if anything stands the test of time, it's that.
Yeah, well, nobody likes to be shocked out of their comfortable torpor, And Otto was good at that. Preminger was good at that. He was the original Maverick director. Him and Cassavetes really were the original Maverick directors. I mean, the first gay bar scene was in Advise and Consent, his movie.
Oh, really?
Which I think was Bette Davis's first movie. Yeah, Advise and Consent. I mean, I think it's Charles Laughton's last movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Otto, but yeah, you see a young Bette Davis up there on the stand, you're just like, whoa, okay. But first gay, it's actually shocking. You know what I mean? Like, if you see a gay bar in a movie now, it won't shock you. But just the style of the era, that early 60s, the way, just the whole mise en scene, the colors and everything that they use, and just the style of the film and everything, to see it in a movie that early, it's just shocking. You have to see it. I can't really explain it. It's like, all these dudes turn around and look at it, and it's like, whoa, wait a sec. This is 1962. How did he get away with it?
Yeah.
I mean, they're obviously gay. It's obviously a gay bar. There's just nothing ambiguous about it. But Otto got away with it. He just, fine, I'll do my own movie. He was just so good at doing his own movies. And sometimes he did some clunkers. They're terrible, but he took big swings. And I like that. You know? It's like the baseball metaphor. You're going to strike out more than you hit it out of the park. When you hit it out of the park, that's what they're going to remember. And Otto hit it out of the park many times.
That's right. Yeah, I forget who said it, but someone said that almost everybody has one good movie in them, because almost everybody's got something to say, and a movie, you can say a lot with one movie, but it's when you're able to make, if you make one good movie, that's in itself impressive, but that's not what makes you stand out. It's the people like Otto Preminger, Martin Scorsese, Akira Kurosawa, and now Christopher Nolan, who make a lot of really good stuff, who have more than one movie inside them, and because there's some movies you watch and it's like, oh, this is a really great movie, and then maybe it doesn't even occur to you to look up what happened to that person's career. It's like, or if you do look it up, sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, like, oh, they made a bunch of movies, but sometimes it's like, oh, that was it. They did that, and then they kind of fell off and made TV, and that can be for any number of reasons. Maybe that's because they were sick of making feature films after that, or maybe that film was a bigger deal less because of the filmmaker more because of who was starring in it, and so the the director or writer got less of the recognition there. But yeah, it's any number of things. When you're acting, do you consider yourself more of an actor for the screen or for the stage? How do you?
I mean, I was born and raised in Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a movie-going town, whereas New York is more of a theater-going town. So more of like movies and television, but I mean, that's kind of what I want to do. But I love the stage. I do enjoy it. I don't like the butterflies you get. Oh. It makes it so satisfying, when you do it. But that beforehand, I mean, Laurence Olivier used to throw up before a performance. He'd get so nervous. He wrote that in his autobiography. I used to actually go backstage and throw up because I get so nervous. So it can be nerve-wracking out there. But I do like the stage. I do enjoy it. I've done a lot of it. Mark and I did a play called 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
It actually came out 3 months after 9/11.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, Scott Conn wrote it.
Wow.
James Caan's son Scotty's and all these,
Was
just did Hawaii Five-0, that series.
Guessing it was written after the event.
Yeah, right after the event.
Wow.
Literally, we had this sucker up in a few months.
Jeez, talk about turnaround time. That's
great.
wild.
It was great. I mean, we packed that theater every night. It was great.
I bet. Wow.
Except for when Scotty's dad showed up. That made me a little nervous. And 5 feet from Sonny Corleone.
Wow.
Saying my lines, going, oh my God.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't get starstruck very often, but that's James Caan. I mean,
yeah, wow.
He was somebody else. He was something else.
I always, of course, like James Caan, but my wife in particular is a really big fan of his work. When he was in the Stephen King, Kathy Bates film Misery, and like she showed me, she's like, have you seen Misery? I'm like, I haven't gotten to it. She's like, oh, you have to see Misery. And I'm like, wow. And yeah, it's I can't imagine. That's the thing that I don't, that I definitely haven't experienced is, doing my thing in front of like a hero, I guess, in that sense, where it's like, you're acting. James Caan is right there.
Right there.
That's
like from me to that chair.
Yeah. Wow.
I was trying to act like I wasn't aware,
Yeah, it's like
I wasn't hyper aware of that Sonny was right there.
I mean, it's like if I was directing on set and then Peter Jackson showed up, it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna hang out and watch your work. I'd just be like, jeez, man. You're really messing me up here. It's like, do your best. It's gotta be your best. But yeah.
I didn't mind. The thing inspired me about him mostly, besides the movies, that he never rehearsed. He didn't like to rehearse.
Oh, James Caan?
He liked things to be spontaneous. When other actors would insist that I don't want to plan what I'm going to do. I just want it to be in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that frustrated a lot of his his fellow actors, but it worked for him.
Yeah.
You got to do what works for you. So if that's what works for you and you don't want to rehearse with me, I mean, I wouldn't have been mad at him. I would just say, okay, well, I'll find someone else to rehearse it with me. Mm-hmm. Because that'll be good for me, because this person will do it one way and you're going to do it another. I'm going to be forced to react truthfully off of your different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
So I would just find a way to roll with it. It's just respecting your fellow actors and how they work, what their processes are. Mm-hmm. I really believe in that. And just, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat. James Caan doesn't want to rehearse with me. I'm going to go find another way and we're going to make this work. So how did I get onto that? We're jumping all over the place.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. It's a podcast. So, yeah, I think sometimes that's something to look at in casting that not everybody does, which is, kind of seeing, all right, what are the actors' methods? Because, if you have one who likes to rehearse and the other one doesn't, well, then, it's like, so what do? Do you compromise and rehearse a little bit or what? It's like, well, if you get actors who all like to rehearse, then, at least it makes scheduling easier. Yeah, I guess. But there's also something powerful about having actors working together who have very different rhythms. Yeah. Because that's where they, rather than just having a back and forth, that's where you get something unique, and, that's where a lot of really interesting chemistry can come from.
That's what I thought was really interesting about Jaws, because you have Steven Spielberg, who was only 26 at the time. He'd only been able to drink illegally for a few years, working with Roy Scheider, who was very much of that method school, and Richard Dreyfuss, who was one of the young upstarts. And then you have this classically trained Shakespearean British actor, Robert Shaw. Wow, how do you deal with all three of these styles? They worked quite well.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder about that. I'm like, what were you thinking? I mean, it's...
What, to cast them?
Well, I mean, not so much like why would you hire these people, so much as, when you're going to set that day and you're going to be working with these three guys, what is going through your mind? Like, do you even have time to really, be apprehensive about it? Do you have time to, or you're just like, okay, you've been up since 3 a.m. trying to get a shark to work or something like that. And then you're like, okay, guys, so you all know your lines. Let's try,
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can be haphazard. But
for a 26-year-old, I just think it's amazing he was able to pull that movie off.
But it's like, and you hear about every film production is fraught with issues and disaster. When you hear about something special, like the movie about the shark has a shark that won't work, that tends to stand out. But every film has huge problems going on with it. But yeah, I think dealing with the real important thing is not being able to see that on screen, when it's done. Yeah, it's Jackie Chan has this great thing where he says, no one cares why your movie isn't good. He's like, are you going to go around to every single movie theater and before it starts say, okay, guys, so there's this one scene where the weather wasn't doing what we wanted to, or we couldn't get this take or whatever. He's like, no, the audience does not care. They care about one thing, good movie, bad movie. What is it? And he's like, you just got to make sure that's what happens. And I think, when I saw Jaws for the first time, I went in knowing that there had been issues, but I'm like, this movie just seems perfect. It
worked. It definitely worked on all levels because of the problems they were having. It made it work.
So when you're acting, do you the roles that you gravitate towards or that you're more interested in, do those reflect projects? Do those projects reflect the kind of films you like to watch? Like, basically, the stuff you'd like to make, is that the same as the kind of stuff you like to see?
Oh, there's a good question. Yeah, and there's some correlation there for sure. Definitely. I mean, I was thinking, when I was younger, I always wanted to play Alger Hiss. You know what I mean? I thought just the whole Alger Hiss story was fascinating, and I thought it'd be great to play Alger Hiss. Was he or wasn't he a Soviet spy? And he's in FDR's cabinet, basically. I mean, how did this guy get there? And the pumpkin papers and all that stuff that was going on, and Whittaker Chambers representing the fat right-wing guy, and Alger Hiss is the dapper. Couldn't possibly be a Soviet agent. Well, actually, now we know he was. I always would love to play him. I wanted to play Frank Hamer. Unfortunately, I knew he's the guy who shot Bonnie and Clyde, which, by the way, was like one of his last assignments was Bonnie and Clyde. He goes back. He was a Texas Ranger back when they were still on horseback. So he sort of bridged.
Yeah, I'm from Texas. So,
there you go. He bridged the gap into the car era. So that was like a dream for him. Now, instead of going, miles on horseback for days, he's getting a car and find who he's looking for. But he tracked Bonnie and Clyde, which nobody was able to do. Always thought I'd like to play him. Kevin Costner played him in that movie, TV movie with Woody Harrelson. What was it called? The Highwaymen.
Oh, okay.
I played Frank Hamer. So I always wanted to play him and Alger Hiss. Would I want to see a movie on Alger Hiss? No, because I'd want to be in it. Yeah, that would frustrate me.
Oh, man.
It's funny. I auditioned for Wyatt Earp many years ago. Remember that movie, the Kevin Costner version?
Oh, okay. I was like, Tombstone's my favorite.
Yeah, well, those two movies came out at the same time.
Yeah.
And I tried to get an audition for it because I knew who the casting director was. She said, "Oh, we already cast it." Oh, well, I decided I hated that guy. I don't know who he was, but I decided I hate him, and I was going to hate I was going to hate his performance because I was mad. I wanted to be in it because I love westerns and I love the Wyatt Earp story. When the movie came out, I didn't know who he was. I just was ready to hate this guy. Well, hated him the second I saw him because he looked like me. It's like he looked like he could be my brother. It was Lyndon Ashby, who was on Teen Wolf, and he's done a lot of stuff. Lyndon Ashby, and he was good, and I hated him for being good. I was so mad that he was good. I'm like, God, he played Morgan Earp. Wow. And I actually since met him. He's a surfer as well.
Oh,
a really good one too.
Yeah.
He's a really good surfer down at I think I told him that I hated you for that, for being good. But no, I mean, L.A. Confidential. That's a movie I would have loved to have been in. I love the film noir also. The cynicism of that post-World War II era, the happy-go-lucky 1920s are over, and then the 30s and the Depression, the 40s and World War II. It did something to movies, it did something to music, it did something to art across the board. So, but I would love to, I think yes, to answer your question. Yeah. Because the reason I hesitate is because I've seen movies that I would not have wanted, that I enjoyed, that I would not have wanted to act in.
Right. Yeah. It's like there's movies I'd love to watch that I would never want to make. There's movies that I hope I get to like sort of produce someday. I don't really want to be involved with making them. I just would like to see them.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's like if I'm ever, up that far up that particular ladder, being able to find like some other young filmmaker and be like, hey, what do you think about Redwall? Or something, which I hear Netflix is finally doing a Redwall series. There are a bunch of books by Brian Jakes. They're children's books, but they've got, there's sort of those children's books that everybody in the family can enjoy, of all ages, like genuinely. But they're looking at making it into an animated series. Looking forward to that. It's been a little quiet for a while as to what they're doing with it, but they released like one piece of concept art and said who's running the project. So, hopefully it works. I got to meet the author as well at a book signing once. So that was cool. My brother has all of his books, paperback and hardback, signed.
Wow.
Yeah. You yourself are an author. Yeah. You wrote the book on boxing in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Pittsburgh boxing, a pictorial history.
So tell us, I can kind of intro some of that, which is while I was working at the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, apparently you were doing your research for that book by going into the old microfilms and doing where there's not really an index that says this is where the boxing is. It's as to the source for that kind of research as you can get. And so it's like you weren't even, it wasn't like you were going into an oversaturated field of books or anything. It's not like you had other books to reference for Pittsburgh boxing so much. It's like you went in and you wrote. How cool is that to be able to say you wrote the book on a topic, like literally? Does that feel pretty cool?
It does feel pretty cool.
It sounds pretty
because
cool.
You're correct. There was no, I started doing, I love esoteric histories, whether it's the Old West, whether it's surfing history, whether it's boxing history, whether it's organized crime history. These are the types of histories that interest me, the fringy stuff. And I noticed that I started doing boxing history journalism back in the 90s, and I noticed that a disproportionate number of historical fighters I liked were from Pittsburgh. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to go find a book and find out what's in the water there. No book. There were books on Philadelphia, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Baltimore, Detroit, every city but Pittsburgh. I went, well, guess it's up to me. It's almost like the book chose me. And then in researching it, it slowly dawned on me that there was more to it than just two guys getting in the ring punching each other in that history. It was a story of these very diverse neighborhoods here, these waves of immigrants that came here and settled in these different neighborhoods. The Polish on the south side, the Irish at the Point on the north side, the Italians in Bloomfield, the blacks and the Russian Jews in the Hill District. It was their story. It was the story of people who came here looking for another life, and these sons watching their fathers die in the foundries and in the factories and the coal mines of black lung or falling into a molten slag pit. And at 15, 16, 17 years old, they're suddenly the provider for their family. Well, what am I going to do? I have to make money now. I got to take care of my mom and my brothers and sisters. I'm 16, 17 years old. I don't want to do what Dad did. I saw what had happened to him. So prize fighting, boxing, I can make more money in one night doing that, boxing, than Dad made in 3 months without a major risk to my health. I might get punch drunk, 40 years down the line, but whatever. It's better than dying in a slag pit, surrounded by pig iron. So yeah, that fascinated me. And angry young men, they lost their father. That's going to make any young man angry, and anger breeds fighters, and so does hunger. So you had a lot of hungry young immigrant kids out here with nowhere else to go who didn't want to die in those foundries and factories or in the coal mines. So they took up boxing. So it's a whole culture, subculture, and it fascinated me. It just kept growing until almost the fact that two guys getting in the ring to punch each other out almost became irrelevant, to the wider story.
Yeah.
So that really interested me, and I really liked that the color line wasn't allowed here. That a lot of blacks were shut out. Blacks got a pretty fair shake for a while. I mean, a lot of them weren't allowed to fight for titles for a while, but you had black world champions in the 1800s. I mean, Jackie Robinson broke through in baseball, 1947. Boxing had already been integrated for half a century at that point. So you had black world champions. But some white fighters drew the color line, but it was usually because they were afraid. Because some of these black fighters were good. It wasn't they didn't think they acted like, oh, well, races shouldn't mix. That wasn't what. No, you just don't want your butt kicked. You fought black, you look in their record, and, oh, you fought black guys. Yeah, but I didn't fight this one, and I'm not going to fight this one.
Isn't it like a great oxymoron for someone to be racist, to say, hey, I don't like that other race. We shouldn't fight each other. It's like, well, if you have a problem with him, don't you want to hit him a little bit? Like, I don't know.
And I think that's why boxing integrated pretty quickly, until Jack Johnson came along, but that's a whole nother story. That's when things just fell apart. But in Pittsburgh, you could not draw the color line. If you drew the color line, you had to fight somewhere else because there was just too many different immigrant groups here.
Yeah.
You don't want to fight the black fighter? Okay. How about the Hungarian from over here or the Polish guy from the south side? You can draw the lines on them too. What's to stop you from drawing lines on everybody who you don't?
And especially at that time in Pittsburgh history, you had so many people where those types of ethnic lines mattered a lot more.
Yeah.
It's
You go to the South Side Market House, and you have one side of the entire auditorium was all Polish people from the South Side with Polish flags rooting for their Polish fighter in there. And on the other side, it's all Italian, all Bloomfield Italians with Italian flags rooting for their guy. And it's just the whole thing was just...
That had to be a blast.
Yeah, just neighborhood and ethnic pride.
Wow.
But if an out-of-towner, if someone from New York came, they're rooting for the Pittsburgh guy. Doesn't matter if he's black, white, Polish, whatever.
Hell yeah.
Nope. Now you're our boy. Before you were a black dude from the Hill District. We're Southside Polish. We're rooting against you. But now we're for you because this New York guy, doesn't matter if he's white or not, we're for you now. So I thought that was really cool.
I think that's pretty rad. Like, there's also... It's one of those cool things about fighting, like boxing and stuff, where it's still sport. And even though there is rivalry, there's still this coming together that happens, where it's like, yeah, we're beating the tar out of each other. Yeah, we want to win. But there's still this, this growth that happens, like where, you do get the Polish and the Italians together in a room, and it's like, and there is some kind of, at some point, maybe you bet against the guy, like you go into a bet with a guy who's from a different background, and you win or lose that bet, and then you end up like having this sort of transaction relationship over something that you're both interested in, and it's like that's where, you know, you start to get, I guess, that American melting pot more as well. Like, it's just these things. It's like, yeah, everybody's watching two people get bloody and bruised, but there's still this emergence that's happening, which, you know, I just, it's one of the reasons why I just like watching any kind of sport anywhere.
Well, you're learning to admire the competition too.
Yeah.
These guys are fighting their hearts out. Wow. See what that Polish kid did? He was pretty tough.
Mm-hmm.
He fought like an Italian. He fought like one of us.
Yeah.
I like him, so maybe he's not so much different from you.
That's cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it was fun writing that book. It was fun
Absolutely.
research. It took 10 years to research and write, and it was worth it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And was that, does that include publishing it, the 10 years? Or
Yeah. I waited a while just because I wanted to get a publisher, but it's such a niche thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just finally just self-published it. And it's getting good play. People are liking it. The second book I published also was on that surfer that drank himself to death, Butch Van Arsdale, in which, if they made a movie about that, it would be like Animal House meets Leaving Las Vegas. So it was a slow spiral into alcoholism and death by 38 years old, which that's what fascinated me about that story. How do you drink yourself to death at 38?
yeah, it's pretty young.
Yeah. I mean, your liver's a sturdy organ. It takes a lot to drink yourself to death. So what was this guy running away from? So I got immersed in that for many years. So hopefully that'll be made into a movie. It would definitely help a genre that needs help, because surfing movies have just been categorically horrible for the most part. They've just been terrible because as soon as you try and talk about, it's like talking about a kiss. If you talk about a kiss, what you know, you don't kiss a woman and then talk about it afterwards. Oh, was it as good for you? You know, it just ruins the kiss. Talking about surfing, the actual act of surfing, ruins surfing. As soon as someone tries to describe what it's like to ride a wave, you sound like an idiot. And movies tend to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah, they do that. They don't talk about it. So, I mean, there's been a few movies that, well, no, that did it too. I was thinking about the Patrick Swayze one. What was it, Point Break? One that everyone makes fun of. Him and Keanu Reeves. Yeah, because they tried to talk about riding waves there too, and it's just like, oh, stop. But part of the charm of that movie is its corniness. But I think the Butch Van Arsdale story it would finally tell a surfing story that was worth telling, where it's not somebody talking about what it's like to ride a wave and like, dude, it's like being on a cloud and like heaven. And stop. Just don't speak.
Yeah.
Don't. It's like I said, it's like talking after a great kiss. Why would you talk? Don't speak.
Yeah, you know, now that you mentioned, because there is so much in film where it's like, show, don't tell. Don't talk about it.
Just a movie, not a talkie.
Yeah. And
it's called a play, not a speech.
I think, and in a weird way, if there's a way to do it, it's almost something that you really need to justify. Because it's like, I don't think, when I see someone surfing, I don't think, why would you ever do that? I'm like, that looks really fun. Duh. You know, it's just on us. You know, just at first glance, I'm like, man, I wish I could do that. That's
doesn't
cool.
require exposition.
Yeah, right. It's like it's like flying. You know, well, why would you want to fly? To get to Giant Eagle faster? It's like, no, to fly. That's why. You know, and the one thing that I think you can have a moment for the character to explain is when it's not necessarily that apparent why you're approaching it the way you do. The example I have for that is The Hustler, Paul Newman. It's the movie about playing pool. So if you like billiards, if you haven't seen The Hustler, what are you doing? But there's a scene in that, like, they're really intense about this. You know, like it's a very intense movie. And it was shot in black and white after color film had been available like forever. So it's got this entire different perspective. And it's all about pool. And there's a point where Paul Newman is asked something like, why do you why do you do billiards? Why do you play that? Why are you so intense about this? You know, like it's because it's like, yeah, I understand liking a game, but I'm not familiar with your world. It's like, why is everybody treating this the way that they do? And he has this little monologue he gives where he basically says, anything can be great. Bricklaying can be great, which is when I like fell in love with that movie because my papa was a bricklayer and what he did was great. It's brilliant. He's better at bricklaying than almost anybody is at anything ever in their lives. But he has, anyway, so Paul Newman has this little speech where he talks about being great at something, being the best, you know, and like having a thing that you're like is your craft and that's what it's all about, you know. And I was like, yeah, that's a very justified moment in the film. It comes pretty late in the movie. You know, it's like, okay, well, I guess you like billiards a lot. It's like, it doesn't necessarily have the same appeal as surfing. It's not necessarily as recognized immediately by an audience as that. But yeah, I think that was like maybe the one time I can think of off the top of my head where someone explaining why they like doing something made sense to me in a film. And it's like, I think it's my favorite part of that movie. Great film, 10 out of 10. Yeah, when you say like there aren't, you know, the surfing genre is categorically bad, I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess it seems true.
You're trying to capture something that's so kind of ethereal and it's hard to, exposition is just not good.
Yeah, it's hard to, I think, for some people who aren't part of that world to like put a story to it.
Yeah.
You know, even though it might be as simple as, hey, it's a competition, do it and do Rocky for surfing. I don't know.
Or it should just be a backdrop, you know, it should just be the backdrop, you know, without too much exposition.
Like a slice of life kind of thing.
Yeah. Because, you know, again, too much exposition. Like the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, those were scripted, man. That had a lot of dialogue in it, and Clint just said, I'll just show it. I want to say it, I'll show it. Yeah, so now instead of a bunch of, okay, I'm going to kill you dialogue, he would just like switch his cigar from one side of his mouth to another, and you knew he was going to kill somebody. You could just tell. He didn't have to say it. You knew he was going to kill somebody.
Simple thing.
That's all it was. Just a simple thing that told you everything.
Wow.
It told you everything. Clint told Sergio Leone to cut out all that doggone exposition and talk. You know, again, this is a movie, not a talkie. And it works perfect. You know when he's going to kill somebody. You know how he's feeling. You know what he's going to do just by his actions.
Yeah.
So I think if they can apply that to surfing and get rid of the exposition, it'd be great. That's a genre that, well, I don't know how much you could do with it, but it might be something. They tried something called John from Cincinnati. You remember that TV series?
No, I haven't. No, sorry.
Yeah, David Milch did it. Kem Nunn was the writer. He's like the surf noir writer, Kem Nunn. He also wrote several seasons, I think, of Sons of Anarchy. But yeah, But it was so, Ed O'Neill was in it. I forget who else was in it, but it was so convoluted and difficult. People just didn't know exactly what it was about, but it was a great effort. You know, it was well acted, well shot, everything about it, but people just couldn't quite latch on to it. But it was an HBO series, John from Cincinnati, I think is what it was called. So anyway.
One more topic I kind of want to get into before we kind of start to wrap up here. All about blocking. Okay. Because I've been dealing with this topic a lot lately when it comes to like stage versus screen and all that. Because, you know, I read books about directing. I do this kind of thing. And there's sometimes it's good to work through the blocking with the actors. Like, don't come to them and say, all right, so you're going to go here and then here and then that and then that. You know, like, have them work through the scene. You know, and have them a lot of the time discover that, like have that push-pull collaboration. But I just started watching this show called I, Claudius. It's a British drama from the 80s, and it's like got unbelievably great writing, directing, and acting, and it's got like Brian Blessed and Patrick Stewart and John Hurt and all these guys. And like terrible production value, like just everything looks like it's on a soundstage. Like none of it's believable for a second so far. Just because of budget issues, okay? But it's like...
You get actors like that and you don't have a budget for your...
British TV in the 80s, man.
John Hurt did not come cheap.
Yeah, I know. So it's like... But they got... Yeah, and he plays Caligula in it. And so it's set in Rome and all that. And this show is... It's kind of amazing how... directed the actors with where the cameras, they do these much longer takes but with multiple setups in them, where they move to close-up. It's like these really brilliantly motivated but elaborate, just masterful scenes. And I was just thinking, how did they come up with this? Like, because some of it I'm wondering, like, did the director come in and just say, all right, here's where the camera's going to be, so we're going to move this way around, or did they work through it all together? I don't know. But when you're working with a director, well, I guess what's, particularly to the subject of blocking, what has your experience been, whether it's on stage or screen, as far as like how much of a collaborative say you might have in that process?
I never really had a problem with it. I just always had kind of I'm not tooting my horn here. I just always kind of had an instinct for it, when to stop, when to go. You know what I mean? Where to stop. Just I don't know. I don't think about it, and I think that's why it works. If I start thinking about something, I screw up. Like I play guitar, and I notice if I start thinking, I screw up and I can't play. Okay, as long as I'm out of my head, I'm okay. So with acting is such an out of my head thing that I do, that if I start thinking about things like that, I'll just the wheels will fall off. I'll be a mess. It's funny because I saw an interview, I think it was with Rob Reiner, talking about The Princess Bride.
Love it.
Yeah, and he said one of the pleasures of working with Andre the Giant was he never missed his mark, ever. And that was from his years of wrestling. Because if you miss your mark in wrestling, where you're supposed to body slam this guy, where you're supposed to do each thing, you could kill somebody, you could hurt somebody. It was just instinctual with him. I think he was the only actor on that set who never once missed his mark. He didn't have to think about it. I'm not saying I'm as acute as Andre. It was never a matter of life or death for me, but it was like, I don't know. I just never really had to think about it. It's just there. It's there in the back of my head, noted, boom, I know what to do.
But like, is that, as in your experience, has blocking been more of a thing where it's given to you or it's discovered throughout the scene?
I'll have to think about that for a second here. Both. I've seen both.
Is there one
director?
Is there one you prefer?
I prefer to just have it be discovered. Yeah. I always go for this. I like spontaneous. Spontaneous is good. I mean, acting is sort of like in control of being out of control, and I like the out of control aspect of it. Just like what's going to happen, but you got to have certain boundaries, so you're kind of challenged in that way to harness certain things. And I think when you harness certain things, that's its own spontaneity. Just the fact that you're harnessing this energy and this thing that's happening. Was that kind of a twisty answer? No,
that's definitely an answer. Cause,
in control of being out of control.
No, yeah, absolutely. Because it's like, being able to, go through it versus being told, all right, you got to go here and then here because the camera's going to start wide. That's going to go to a close-up. I think that's one of the things that, because, watching this show, and it there were things about it that reminded me of things that I have done or have tried to do. And I was like, oh, I really need to think about the degree to which, because recently, I'm starting my sentences over here, but recently I was thought, oh, whenever you can, just always have the actors discover the blocking. But then I watched like an episode of this show, and I was like, there's a whole lot of film that there's just so much about the medium of cinema that, having the camera be an active participant as opposed to an observer is a huge choice to make. And I think it really would depend less on me as a director for so much as like what the project calls for. Because there's some projects where it needs to be more observational. It needs to be less in your face with the choreography of the camera and like how structured the art form is, I guess. But that was the show that like I just watched. I was like, oh yeah, I think sometimes you can do this. Because it's something that I used to do, and I was like, oh, that's not the right way to do it. You should have the actors discover it, and now I'm like, oh well, it depends on the situation.
You discover just your style.
Yeah,
I've talked to like when young actors would come to LA and they're asking me questions and stuff like that, and I would just tell them you got to find what your style is. I mean, again, here's another famous story of Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle talking about batting. They were guys of two totally different batting styles and temperament. They're both Hall of Famers. They're both great. They both hit it out of the park every time. But Ted Williams was very cerebral about his hitting. He was into the science of it and the mechanics. And I mean, he was like Einstein. He could break it down. Whereas Mantle was just instinctive. He didn't think about it. And he said after talking to Williams, he says, I couldn't hit for 3 months. I hit like a 3-month slump. He had a slump because he was so in his head, and trying. Williams got him thinking about it.
Oh,
it screwed him up.
Yeah.
Ted needed to do that for his batting. He's in the Hall of Fame because of it. Mickey needed to not think about it. He's in the Hall of Fame. Find what works for you. Sometimes maybe thinking about it will work for you. It just what works for you, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about acting. I just read a book called Real Life Drama, and it was about the story of the group theater, which is where Lee Strasberg, Stella Adler, Sanford Meisner, Bobby Lewis, all these great, renowned acting teachers of the 20th century who any actor you can think of that you admire studied with one of them or somebody who studied with them. Brando, Pacino, De Niro, Meryl Streep, they all studied with one of those people. Duvall, all of them. And they would just, Stella Adler and Lee Strasberg were at each other's throat. My way is the right way. No, my way is the right. It's just, you do what works for you. Most of those great actors like Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman studied with most of them and took something from each one of them. So if you get too locked into something and don't get flexible, you're going to deny yourself something. So you find what works for you and create your own style.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a nice note of wisdom for us to end on. I've enjoyed this conversation. It's nice to kind of just chat and get to know you more and this kind of stuff. I'd love to have you on again sometime.
Love to, yeah.
Awesome.
So much more we haven't covered.
Yeah, and just wrap up, is there a, for people who are interested in your book or any of your work, if there's any way that you want people to, I don't know, follow you or anything, we can, we can have anything that you want in the description of the video so you don't have to read off a website title or whatever. But
my books are on Amazon.
Books are on Amazon?
Pittsburgh Boxing, A Pictorial History, which, again, it's not just a book about people hitting each other. There's much more to the history than that. And a book called Remembering Butch, the Butch Van Arsdale story. He's about that star surfer from the 60s who unfortunately drank himself to death. But it's an oral history. So all the people there kind of telling the story with some of my narrative, splicing it all together. But it's fascinating story. And there's a Jaws tie-in there too, because Butch was a member of the Duke Kahanamoku surf team. The manager was a guy by the name of Kimo McVeigh, who was also Don Ho's manager. His father was the captain of the USS Indianapolis.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yikes.
And I interviewed him 6 months before he passed, so he told me all about that. So about the Indianapolis, what that did to his family, and just it's a fascinating, and it's in my book. It addresses that. So Remembering Butch, again, it's not just about a dude surfing. It's never just about something that simple. It's about mental health. Mental health is a big thing in it. Not just surfing. It's mental health. It's a lot of things. Learning how to deal and learning how to grow up in a way to where you feel like a productive citizen and not throwing your dreams away. So,
well, thank you very much for being my guest on this. Everyone, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again soon with another episode. And if you just can't wait that long, we've got a few older ones that you can take a listen to, or just watch this again. Who knows? See you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.